Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I wanted to give my overall thoughts on the anime series Interviews with Monster Girls, otherwise known as Demi-chan wa Kataratai, which I thoroughly loved. It was such a heartwarming and just feel-good series, and it really had a lot of intriguing aspects, taking a lot of these mythic, lore-based, fantasy sort of creatures, vampires, succubi, Dulahans, a snow woman, which I never even heard of, and add this sort of sci-fi fantasy flair to it, explaining in a sort of scientific, real-world sense how these creatures might have survived in our real world. But at the core of this series, it's very much about a teacher, a couple of teachers, arguably, but one mainly, who is a regular, normal, average, everyday human who's actually kind of jacked for being like a bookworm and everything like that. Definitely testing the sort of expectations of the way a person is built and the way they look, not judging a book by its cover, which is very much sort of the call to arms for the entire story aesthetic of this series. Don't judge books by their cover. Don't act on expectations alone and preconceptions. Here's this guy. He's very intrigued by these demi-chans, as they're known, these monster girls, and just wants to learn that much more about them. And it's just so endearing because each of the girls, every now and then I run into an anime like this where it's like a couple of the characters are really likable, one stands out. And one actually did stand out to me as being like my favorite, the one I felt the most for, but I really equally loved all of the characters in this anime. And I was really sad that the latest episode was actually episode 12, the finale of what is hopefully only season 1, because I loved it. I loved watching it every week. I didn't review it episodically at all. I did one video giving my thoughts on it, like the second or third episode or whatever it was, that was very much focused on Machi, the Dulahan. The Dulahan being a person who is born with their head separate to their body. There's a sort of mystical, magical flame that erupts from their neck, and they have to carry their head around for all intents and purposes. And she is the most endearing character to me out of all of them. But you have Hikari, the vampire. You have Yuki, the snow woman. Sato Sensei, who is the succubus, and Takahashi Sensei is the teacher who has this scholarly curiosity and fascination in these girls, but it goes beyond that. He ends up working for them and also working with them to help them in various ways, like when it comes to Yuki, the snow woman. She's fearful of the mythology surrounding snow women and how the stories tell of snow women usually luring men in and being, their ultimate demise, kind of like a Black Widow aesthetic, that kind of thing. And she's fearful of producing ice and that this might happen at random. And he guides her and makes her understand through the course of, a couple of episodes that she can produce this based on emotional outbursts or how she's feeling. It's something that coincides with her emotional instability and things of that nature. So he's able to guide her to understanding how to kind of pseudo-control this ability so she doesn't have to fear it. She doesn't have to fear living up to those mythologies of old where she would be damning to anyone she wanted to be close with. In a similar fashion, does he go through trial and error to help Hikari the vampire understand the history of the mythological vampire aesthetic and how so much of that is based on the reality of who she is as a vampire. She's very sensitive to sunlight, which speaks to, she can get sunburned very easily. It can really tank her energy. It can waste her energy, and she'll be laid out for days if she spends too much time in the heat and the sunlight. Her eyes are very sensitive to it. They are refractive and reflective the same way, wild animals' eyes are in the jungle and in the wild, because there's this predisposition as a vampire to hunt at night kind of thing and be as stealthy as possible. And all these things attribute to the added mythology of what vampires are, the way we consider vampires in the real world. And this helps her better understand her own nature, and there are certain aspects of it that she schools him on. He's coming to these hypotheses of his own accord, and then she's like, well, yeah, I know. I have been a vampire since birth. I kind of figured a lot of this out. But then there are other things like it's hilarious when she goes through like a teething thing, where she wants to see who of her friends is the best to nibble on, who has the softest or most pliable skin to just sort of nibble on, because she in order to intake the blood, they get like bags of blood that are donated for vampires. You know, Demi-chan's monster girls like this, Demis, are few and far between. Not many exist in any of the different walks of, you know, Demi life, whether that be Snow Woman, Vampire, Dullahan, and presumably others. I don't know what others there might be. The teacher, as I say, Sato, is a succubus. There could be other classifications of Demi out there if we ever get a season 2, which I hope we will. I hope we'll delve more into that and see what other kind of demi-humans there are. But I mean, it all goes back to, you know, trying to appease that need to want to go and suckle blood out of somebody. She can get the intake of the blood through the bags that are donated and everything for vampires like her. But she's the only vampire in her family. Her elder sister, or younger sister, whatever it is always kind of, she's more straight-laced, whereas Hikari herself is a wild child, and, you know, she's somewhat of a poor student, needs help studying, she's somewhat lazy, and just wants to have fun. She's very raucous and bouncy. She's somewhat of a prankster, as we see. And so it's just funny engaging this whole scenario where he's like brought everyone in, and they're even, you know, writing on like a chalkboard to see, okay, well, let's gauge everyone's, you know, tastiness, if you will. She bites on Yuki, the snow girl, and that's her favorite. She tries, you know, Machi the Dullahan, and that's all right, but not quite as good. You know, she thinks about taking some nips of Takahashi Sensei's arm, but it's too muscular and too hard to really sink into without actually trying to pierce the skin and suck the blood and all this stuff. It's just wacky and hilarious, but in a heartwarming way, because he's in his own way being able to understand much more about these girls, these demis, and he's also being so interactive in a way that can help them. When it comes to Machi the Dullahan, as I say, my favorite character, the one most endeared to me, who has to carry her head around separately to her body and all of the precarious positions that puts her in, one of the first effects he manages to do for her is to talk to the principal and allow her to wear a backpack, where everyone would have to wear like a sidearm bag to hold their school books and everything, because she has to carry her head literally in her hands, and if she has to hold a sidearm bag, this is going to potentially risk danger to her head. You know, she could drop it if holding it by just one hand and everything like that. There are times when we see her wearing her head in a harness on her chest, but these are only like special occasions, sometimes when she's eating, you know, that kind of thing. And so it makes it that much easier for her to just function normally, like every other student, if she has a backpack. And can sort of, you know, blind that rule for her specifically for those purposes. In another episode that really stood out to me, you know, in the video that I posted, my thoughts on the series, it was an episode that was very much focused on Machi, and I was left with myriad questions about how her Dullahan makeup worked. And so there was a follow-up episode very recently, one of the last couple of episodes, as of the time of this recording, after, you know, the finale, where Takahashi Sensei brought her to this friend of his of old, who's kind of like a college professor or whatever it was, and they're really trying to understand the mechanics of how her body works, because she'll intake food in her separated head, the mouth of her separated head, but it will somehow be in her body. Like as she swallows it as a normal human being would do, it goes down the neck into your stomach, it digests. And I'm wondering how the hell that works. How exactly do they answer to that? Are they ever going to reason that out? And this episode very specially did so, talking about a sort of interdimensional portal that exists right underneath her head, where it's cut off. There's no visible opening where, you know, like the neck hole would be or anything like that. It's completely closed off. But as she chews and then swallows food, it interdimensionally transports itself into this mystical, magical green flame that represents where her neck would be, and thus goes into her body and things of that nature. She can command and control her body, although there are times in the finale episode, for example, where she references, you know, if her head is too far away from her body, it can almost be akin to playing a video game where she's not even certain it's her own self. She's still commanding it, but it feels like something otherworldly, like something removed from herself. And all of these things are just highly intriguing, and it adds to the heartwarming, fun-loving nature of these characters. This little clique that each individual girl, they felt alone in the world, and they were able to be understood by Takahashi Sensei. He was able to understand them and support them and guide them and help them, aid them. Some of them fell smitten with him, and the things like that. But of course, he puts the cap on the bottle in the finale when asked by Sato Sensei, the succubus, who also is digging on him. There's been a whole history all season long where, she is so scared. She's like wearing a full body tracksuit every day at school for her job, because as a succubi, she has this ability where if any of her skin is exposed, her ability is to very much heighten the sexual reaction in anyone who might be attracted to her and everything like that. And so Takahashi Sensei has been really able to muster himself together and show restraint, the most restraint anyone else has ever shown. So she assumes that he must be unaffected by her abilities, and so this makes her smitten with him and wanting to maybe seek trying some sort of getting together with him, a relationship with him. And of course he's just nervous as all hell about that, because it's really impacting him just as much as it does anyone else. He's attracted to her genuinely. So that's comical, but there is a point where she asks him in the finale episode, would you ever consider, if you found out a student had fallen for you in some way, would you ever try to pursue that in any way? What would your reaction be to that? And he says pretty straightforwardly, no, because it's a student of mine. That would be very awkward. The age difference, the fact that they're a student, I would not pursue that. I'm their teacher. It would be wrong. And this kind of opens the door for Sato Sensei to be like, okay, well, maybe then I got a shot. She's obsessed. She's got like this detective friend of hers who I guess helped guide her in her early years, similarly to what Takahashi Sensei is doing with the other girls in the present. And this guy's like, go out there, find somebody, stop, adhering your life to the fears of trying to put yourself out there, of trying to find someone. But he realizes she's got her sights on somebody without knowing who it is, and then realizing, it's Takahashi Sensei. And so she's calling him up in the middle of the night. What should I do? I want to ask him out. What kind of date should we go on? Should we go get drinks? Should we have a meal? If we go get drinks, what kind of drink should I have? So I don't get drunk, so I don't seem like an idiot. He's like, can I just go back to bed and we can talk about this tomorrow? So it's absolutely captivating and insane that this final episode of the season sees the girls, mostly led by Hikari, the vampire girl, wanting to spend some time in the pool, but they want to reserve it for just, no boys allowed, anything like that, just their small little clique, because it's so rare that they get such alone time and that they could feel such at ease. And so Takahashi sets it up that Sato Sensei, the succubus, will be involved, and he's planning on just leaving. He's like going to leave her to watch the girls and everything. He feels like it might be awkward if he's like just observing the girls in the pool in their bathing suits and everything like that. Rightfully so. But she very much wants him to stay, and it's because she wants to kind of approach him. And she loosely puts it out there, but she's like, she can't quite get it out. And then finally she's like, well, since you're not really as affected as most other people, I want to show you my cute bathing suit. And she pulls out her well endowments, pumping all the steam engines in Takahashi Sensei. And he's just like, very cute. You're very cute. And then she's embarrassed. He's embarrassed, everything like that. But I love it. The endearing quality of these characters, the show overall, it's just a magical thing to watch. It's kind of like Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, which I've also enjoyed this season and haven't covered in reviews. Both of these shows are fun-loving and heartwarming and really endearing, but this show even adds a lot of very intriguing concepts, as I say. Doing sort of investigative looks, scientific approaches to how a vampire might live as a real being in our real world, how a Dullahan might survive, how a snow woman might survive, and all these things, how a succubus, all of these sort of restraints they would have to feel in their daily lives, not having full autonomy, full freedom as everyone else would, because of their makeup, because of who and what they are. And Takahashi, from the very beginning, it begins as a snowball curiosity, but it eventually, snowballs up and up and up and up to the point where not only is he gaining new awareness and learning things from them, but he's able to teach these girls as well and make their lives easier and make them have more fun, make them have less restraint, more freedom, and all these kinds of things. And I just really thoroughly loved the series. I really found it heartwarming. I enjoyed very much. I looked forward to every episode. And it was interesting to me because, if you look at Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinju Descending Stories, which is a series I did cover episodically this season, it just ended, and it really was emotional toward its end for me, and I was very depressed and sad to see it go. Little could I have suspected that this series, Interviews with Monster Girls, would be just as endearing, maybe not as depressing and emotional, but it genuinely left me with a sadness to see that it was all over. I'm gonna genuinely miss this show, and it kind of ends on a comical note, but the most poignant aspect is that Takahashi Sensei is the final dialogue you hear, and he's saying, I'm going to need many more interviews with these monster girls. So that seems to hint another season is yet to come, and I am very much going to be keeping my fingers crossed in hopes for that. Because I just loved it. I fell in love with this series, the heartwarming nature. Again, that science fiction-y sort of scientific approach to explaining how these beings might exist in our real world if they did, and seeing the guidance that they all brought forth for each other. I mean, one of the aspects toward the end of the season, one of the last couple of episodes, sees the vice principal starting to feel reservations about Takahashi getting so close to the girls and being so guiding so that they never go to anyone else seeking help. And by the end of that episode, because he's kind of internalized and he's turned away, and they end up at Hikari, the vampire girls, putting it forth, they all record like a video that they're going to say how much he means to them for all of the help he's provided them. And it's such a heartwarming, touching moment. I mean, he actually cries, and I got misty-eyed because I'm like, wow, he didn't necessarily appreciate how much he'd done for them and how much that helped them and impacted them positively, that they would be so moved, that they would actually make this video recording to tell him that. And by the end, they actually had branched out to other kids in their class. And the vice principal sees them hanging out with these other kids. Finally, through the guidance of Takahashi Sensei, being able to branch out and broaden who they would speak to and how they would, interact with the other kids in their class and everything like that. And finally, the vice principal's like, no, you know what? I think I was wrong. I think you've actually been doing a great job. I mean, he's looking at the demigirls hanging out with just the regular cast of students that then becomes their friends. And he's appreciating this might not have happened were it not for the intervention and guidance of Takahashi Sensei. So he was then approved to continue on with what he's been doing, the effect that he's been having on them positively. And I'm really going to thoroughly miss this. I will definitely be looking forward to chomping at the bit for season 2, even if I never pick it up for, episodic discussion or anything like that. I am chomping at the bit for a second season, and it can't come soon enough because I just loved this one. 2 pieces. I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below if you watched this particular series, Interviews with Monster Girls, Demi-chan wa Katara Tai. If you enjoyed it as much as I did, let me know in the comments below. Love it or hate it, anything goes in the comments below. If you thought it was average, nothing special, that is also welcome. Just as long as it's conversational and not adversarial, I'm all for it. So, otherwise, it'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.